In this video, we're going to talk about some things that you should bear in mind when you're writing your own function definitions. So one general piece of advice that's always a good thing to keep in mind when writing a function is that a function should really try to do just one thing. Don't try to combine too many different types of operations into one big function. It's better to split them up and break them into multiple smaller functions. Also, when you're naming functions, try to pick names that are clear and indicate what the function does. Finally, try to make sure that all your functions are written in a consistent style, both in terms of how you format the code as well as the types of code that you write. So let's look at one example of how we could take some code and encapsulate it into a function. So typically, once we find ourselves writing the same bit of code over and over again, maybe 3 or more times, then we might start to consider that we want to wrap it in a function instead. So here, for example, we are calculating the mean of a vector of numbers 3 times, right? We have in this first line, we have a vector of 3 numbers stored in the variable values1. And in this next line, we add up those 3 numbers, and then we divide by the length of the vector, right, which will give us the mean. And then we do pretty much the same thing on lines 4 and 5, and then the same thing again on lines 7 and 8, just with different vectors of numbers. Now, let's say in the future you wanted to change this slightly. You would have to remember to make the same change to each one of these operations, right? Assuming that, maybe you wanted to double the mean for some reason, right? You'd have to remember to go and multiply each of these fractions by 2, which would be very easy to accidentally miss one or make a mistake somewhere. And so if instead of writing the code out 3 times, we just had it written once in a function, it would be much easier to make that change. So here's how we might do so, right? We might say, well, what is the thing that varies between each of them, right? And the answer is that it was the vector of values that we wanted to calculate the mean of. So since that's the thing that varies, right, we can say, well, that should be the argument to the function, right? And so we're going to write a function here. We're going to give it the name calculate mean, which describes what it does. We use the function keyword to indicate that we're assigning a function to that name. And then we're going to indicate that we have one input argument, which we're going to use the placeholder name values for. And inside our code, we'll use that sum function again to add up the values vector, and then the length function again to get the number of items in the values vector. And we'll store the mean in a variable called result, and then we'll return that variable. And then, right, we can simplify our actual code, and we can just use the calculate mean function on these 3 different vectors.